Yes, my name is Sean Robinson. I teach science and digital literacy at Riverside Secondary in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, Canada. Alexis, I don't know about the sunny Vancouver. We get a lot of rain, right? We get lots of rain. We don't bat an eye if there is a week of rain. So it's wonderful to be here in Miami. So, electricity. That's what we're going to talk about today. We've got Ohm's law, sources of power, resistors, short circuits, types of circuits. It's really the bread and butter of the Science 9 curriculum and the only physics unit where you get to play with the Van de Graaff generator. Now, folks, do not try this at home. I guarantee the second one is always worse. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to take you through a thought experiment. Okay, we're talking about electricity, and so just imagine that you are teaching electricity. And as you access prior knowledge, you come to understand that the students know nothing about electricity, particularly Ohm's law, which is a big part of your curriculum. So as you consider how to teach these students these concepts, I want you to think about what is the first thing that you do. Okay, now you can put together some worksheets, you can create some word problems, grab a teaching video, put together a PowerPoint presentation, gather some materials, create some activities. So what do? Okay, well, I want to show you something that might be a little bit different. I want to show you the simplicity of it and yet the power. What if you were to seek out a connection? What if, as you were trying to have your students explore electricity learning outcomes, you connected with somebody from the community, or an expert, or an organization, or a classroom around the world to help lead your students to acquire the skills, knowledge, and understanding. This is a tweet I sent out to find a who. So what I'm proposing here is to have you, as you look at your learning outcomes, consider who can we engage as we learn. And so I tweeted Eladio from the Dominican Republic, and he replied, and we set up a Skype chat, and this is how it went.
Hi, Eladio.
Greetings.
Can you see us?
I see you, but I don't see me. Hold on.
No problem. I don't see you either.
So, there we are in all our splendor and beauty. Bam!
Awesome.
Greetings, Dominican Republic.
Hi, Dennis. How you doing?
We're doing good. End of the day here, beginning of the day for you guys. Sorry to hear that.
We're just getting going. So greetings from British Columbia, Canada. Just to kind of start us off, so my name is Sean Robinson, and I'm a teacher here at Riverside Secondary. We have a Science 9 class here that's happy to communicate with the Dominican Republic and just learn about what's going on there. And I hear that you have some students that have stuck around after school, so we really appreciate that.
It's okay, I'm here till 5. It's only 2:30.
Burning the midnight oil. Thanks. Yeah.
We had some kids that came and stayed after school, so they could more or less speak to your 9th graders and give them sort of show them a couple of photos and tell them about a trip that they took to the sugarcane fields, bateys as they call them. Those are basically the slums where they keep the paid slaves.
Wow.
So there's paid slavery here.
And you can just imagine how that conversation impacted my students. So we went on to talk about those bâtés and the difficulty in getting electricity into them. They might have 1 or 2 hours of electricity, but that would be during the day to run machinery. So there would be no electricity at night for students to be able to do some learning or read a book or schoolwork. And so that brings me to a very crucial part in this process. And it's a favorite part for me because that gives me a chance to turn to my students and say, now that we know what we know, what are we going to do about it? And bringing in that idea of makerspace as well. What are we going to make about it? And so I give my students a chance to create their own learning goals. And so we had one student thinking about raising some money, working with the local middle school to be able to raise money for some LEDs and some supplies. Another student was looking at innovating, creating lights, and then even another student, and I love this one, their goal was to know I made a difference. And it's, fantastic to be able to give these students an opportunity to say, yeah, actually, you can make a difference. And so Jana raised $372 with weekly bake sales, and Alhan and her group, well, they did some innovating with different ways of creating electricity, and Caleb and his group started creating these 3D printed cases for the lanterns. And in the end, all the students settled on creating solar-powered 3D printed lanterns to help Dennis and Eladio and the students in the bâtés. And so they were able to take it all the way. This is Abraham Kang. He's in the Dominican Republic. Those are the lanterns that the students had made, and he was able to take the lanterns plus materials to make more. He spent the afternoon there teaching the students how to make their own solar-powered lanterns to help out in the bâtés. And it's wonderful. Back at home, we had another Skype chat. We got together with Eladio, and we did a debrief. It was a great opportunity to bring together students from different classes, different schools, and even different countries, all from a simple connection. And you can see us holding the Sustainable Development Goals signs up there. So SDG 7, affordable and clean energy, SDG 4, quality education. And really, I talk a lot about teaching SDGs with my students, but I think about, making progress on the SDGs. And when we give them an opportunity to make a connection, that gives them a chance to make some progress on these SDGs. And now, the great thing about this whole process is that you could see it right here. So my students have public digital portfolios. So if you're interested in the story, you can check out Jana's story. She'll tell you all about it. But not just the story, but what she learned as well. And so students learned Ohm's law. They had to. If the resistors were too strong, the lights would be too dim. If the resistors were too weak, then the LEDs would burn out. And I remember standing in front of my students and saying, well, we've got to put some resistors in these PC boards. Wouldn't it be great if there was, I don't know, a formula that would help us know what kind of resistance we needed to put into these PC boards? And you know what? There is. It's called Ohm's law. Let me show you. And so students, they didn't just learn Ohm's law. There was soldering. They developed communication skills. They worked with schematics. There was 3D design, 3D printing, successes and failures. And so it was a great process. But I want to say that when you have that mindset of a connection lens, it can be used in everything. Time and time again, my students have made positive connections, whether in person or through Skype or Google Hangout or FaceTime, and they were able to learn what we had to learn, but through human connection. So we connected with Saul Mwame, learned more about the global goals. We connected with Karishma Bagani, and learned about water purification. Connected with a local politician, a submersible engineer, a stem cell researcher who taught us about pluripotent stem cells. Now, if you don't know about pluripotent stem cells, you really should know about them because they're different than embryonic stem cells, and they can be created from your own blood or liver or skin. And just imagine sitting there and getting the most recent research about stem cells from an expert and making that connection with the person. We also connected with Tanya Harrison, and she's a planetary scientist, and she, at that time, was mentioning about how with the research that she was doing and the pictures that she was getting from Mars, that she has great evidence that there's liquid water on Mars. And one of our recent connections brought us to create solar-powered computer solutions that we were able to get to Uganda and bring to the slum area and an area out in the outskirts of town. And once again, it was just a positive experience for my students. They were able to make a connection with the students in Uganda. There was to and fro using the digital portfolios that we have. And so that's my proposal to you, is to consider, when you look at those learning outcomes, who can we engage as we learn? You might be thinking, okay, Robinson, well, what about the research? Well, actually, this article in Educational Psychology, it looked at why high school students are suffering so much from lack of motivation in their classes. And what they were finding out, that more than their belief in their own ability or in their effort, it was actually the meaningfulness of the task that made a difference. And they went on to say, students need to believe in and identify with tasks that require time and effort. If students value what they are doing, then they are likely to commit to it, even if it is not particularly enjoyable. And then I have more research on video conferencing in particular, where Krutka and Carano, they looked at the scholarly literature about video conferencing. And what they found was that when students are in a video conference, it actually awakens their ideas, awakens themselves to the whole world and their place in that world and their responsibility for that world. And so they went on to say, whether we aim to address environmental concerns, reduce prejudice, or pursue specific projects, video conferencing can transcend geographic boundaries and provide us an impetus for action. Now, Allison mentioned the 21st century skills, the 4 C's. And when we think about making that connection, you might say, okay, well, I can see the communication, but also in connections-based learning, we connect, then we collaborate, and then we cultivate for positive change. And you can see that overarching stream just kind of leads students into all of these things. You're collaborating, but as you respond to the connection, it requires creativity. And as you connect with these experts or people that have different ideas than you, then that leads to critical thinking and making opinions about the world. And then I want to bring up also the SAM-R model. And we're thinking about this device, let's say your laptop. And it's so much better than a typewriter. And if we compare the two, if you're using it to substitute, maybe that would simply be word processing. Add some images and text, now you have some augmentation. Maybe if you're using that laptop to connect with the world and learn about it, well, I would call that modification. But redefinition, it's not easy, is it? I mean, it's a lot to ask. But when you think about using your laptop for positive change, well, that's redefinition to me. So I want to tell you a little bit of a story about Haley. So we connected with Karishma Bagani, who was an NYU student, and she was working on creating these water purifiers, these low-cost water purifiers that she would be able to get back into her home country of Kenya. And so after we had our chat, I turned to my students and I said, okay, now that we know what we know, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to make about it? And Haley and her group they came up. And Haley said, well, we heard that Karishma, she needs help with her website. Do you think that we could do that? Of course. Ms. Robinson, how long do we have on this? Well, that's kind of tough. As long as you want. And in fact, they were working on this partnership well after Science 9 was done. And I remember calling up Haley's mom, because you have to let people know about this. And so I was saying, okay, well, yeah, Ms. Smith, Haley's going to be working with an NYU student. Yeah, she's going to help out with the web page. Is that all right? And I remember Mom saying, thank you, because Haley's been looking for something to sink her teeth into, and this is just the thing. Now, I have up there a QR code that's going to lead you to Haley's post so that you can see all about it. But I want to read out verbatim what Haley had to say about it, because I think it's important. She said, this project that we are working on is not only making an impact on the world, but it is also impacting me as a person. It is making me step out of my comfort zone and use my head to think about each individual step. Starting this project, I decided it would be beneficial to read about the problems that we are trying to help. But after reading articles, websites, and papers, I have a newfound appreciation of everything that I have in my life, and I no longer take things for granted like I would have yesterday. Now, instead of hearing about the struggles people are facing and feeling bad for them, I am making a contribution to one day end those struggles. I will no longer be the person that will stand aside and watch things happen. And that's from Haley. And so that's the essence of what I call connections-based learning. Leveraging connection and harnessing it for teaching and learning. And so I would implore you to consider connection as you're teaching your students. Let it guide your inquiry, guide your differentiation. Open up the world to your students, because I think that, and we all know this, that they can do amazing things. And so as you consider your learning outcomes on Monday morning, I would hope that you would just think, you'd look at it and you could think to yourself, who can we engage as we learn? Because there's a whole world out there to help your students find meaning, motivation, and a chance to make a difference. Thank you.